Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Empowered Consulting's Social Justice Podcast Series. This podcast was created on behalf of the Social Justice Committee to educate and raise awareness on different topics within social impact and education. We're your hosts for this episode. My name is Mira Patel, and I'm a junior at NYU.
And I'm Ayushi Presti, and I'm a senior at NYU. Today, we'd like to introduce our guest for this episode, Deidre Franklin, the Chief Program and Equity Officer for Oliver Scholars, which is a nonprofit that prepares high-achieving Black and Latino students from underserved New York City communities for success at top schools and colleges. As an avid advocate for students in historically marginalized groups, we're excited to welcome her and speak more about how she furthers the work of being culturally responsive and holistic in her approach to student success.
Deidre, thank you so much for appearing on our episode. We'd appreciate if you could introduce yourself to our audience and talk a little bit about how you became involved in Oliver Scholars.
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. It's really exciting to know that young people such as yourselves are actually interested in engaging in these types of conversations. So I came to Oliver Scholars after being, in the psychology youth development field for years. I'm a counseling psychologist by training, and decided after working in school-based clinics counseling adolescents and working at Bellevue Hospital counseling adolescents that I wanted to cast a larger net. And what I mean by that is individual counseling is great, but I saw a need after speaking to students, a need for more holistic engagement with young people at an earlier age. And so I pushed into college access programs, basically talking with CEOs around academics are great, academic enrichment is great, but there is a whole nother piece that young people need in order to be successful. And that is social and emotional uplift and engagement. So that's how I came into Oliver Scholars, is by doing the college access work, but also wanting to do it with young people who are transitioning from public high schools within the city in under-resourced communities to predominantly white private institutions. And I saw a great need to come into Oliver Scholars and really work with our young people to be able to move into the predominantly white institution spaces, being strong and understanding all of the systemic isms that they're going to have to deal with, and making sure that they can move into the spaces and still be academically successful with all of the things going on out here in society. So that's how that's the short version of how I came to Oliver.
That's really incredible. And I admire that so much. And kind of, I guess, along the same lines, like, what drives you to do the work that you do at Oliver Scholars? Is there a specific experience that maybe you would consider as like an inflection point that motivated you to get involved in this work now?
Yeah, as I said, I think it was a lot of the conversations that I had had with young people when I was doing individual counseling, because all of my work has been in under-resourced communities. So as I reflect on my work in high school that I worked in Jersey City, at that time, the AIDS crisis was at its height, and we were having a lot of teenage pregnancies and families who were struggling with the AIDS crisis. I just saw a lot of inequity happening around those communities, and I saw how education would impact, or sort of educational experiences were being impacted by the inequities. And similarly at Bellevue Hospital, really hearing stories about, community experiences and the inequities within the communities, and feeling like I can't really do this on a one-on-one when it's so systemic. How can I actually create change on a larger level? So that was kind of the turning point for me. It wasn't just one one thing. It was a multitude of experiences that I had within a number of years that had me really thinking, what more can I do? In addition to the fact that at that time, I was really doing a lot of research on the impact, the psychological impact of racism, specifically on African Americans. And it really all came together for me, the two pieces of seeing what's happening to young people educationally and reflecting on the inequities and studying the psychological impact of racism. I said, there has to be more that I can do. And that's how I came to work in these spaces, specifically looking at equity pieces and the psychological well-being of young people in marginalized communities.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of challenges to be unpacked there. And as you kind of continue to do this work, I guess what are some of the biggest challenges that you faced, when you're advocating for students now, especially with your work in Oliver Scholars?
I think what's interesting is that it always feels like it's an uphill battle in advocating for the young people. Um, we work a lot with the young people on, expanding their scope and doing what they need to do academically to gain entrance into many of these institutions, whether it is the independent high schools or even colleges, right? We have many of our young people going to top tier colleges. And I think some of the struggle for me is as we work with the young people to really fortify them to be successful in these institutions, inevitably the systems and society knocks them down. And that's what's most frustrating, is that you really want kids to be strong enough to push through and to move through these spaces. And then we see them getting pushback and getting shut down. And it's our job to kind of keep that light, keep that glimmer of hope, and to have those conversations with young people to try to keep them motivated and keep them pushing through places and spaces that sometimes will not value them or value their thought, their thinking, and might just want them there just sort of for the numbers, so to speak. And there are many places that are still like that. It's disheartening. So the struggle for me, once again, because I am student focused, is making sure that the young people stay strong. And what I say to them is, you have to get up and fight the fight and keep pushing, whether that's individually or it's collectively. So a lot of what we do with the young people is community based as well, and understanding that you have to value being in service to your community. And so it's not just about you, it's about the collective. So that's one of the struggles that I have, is keeping the young people strong and in it to win it, knowing that they're fighting against a lot of isms.
Yeah, that's a tough challenge. And so we know that you prepare your students, the students in your organization, for college success by developing a guidance plan that is holistic and that targets not only their academic growth, but also their personal and professional growth. Could you please give us some examples of aspects of your curriculum that target these various goals?
Yeah, so the holistic approach is not only about the academics, as I was mentioning earlier. It's also about the social and emotional development of the young people. More specifically, areas that I push in on is around identity development, to really understand who they are and what they bring from multiple perspectives. And so we're looking at race, we're looking at ethnicity, we're looking at gender, we're looking at sexuality, we're looking at social class, all of these pieces that make us who we are. And for many of us, we don't really reflect on, who we are. We kind of move through life feeling, like we know who we are, but sometimes we just don't think about it. And so we do a real intentional work with the young people around the whole identity piece of really understanding who they are, so that when they move into places and spaces and they engage people, they really understand maybe how folks might see them. And sometimes that differs from how they see themselves. We do the identity work. We do the work around understanding the structures of society and the systems and the ways in which society has been set up related to all of these different groups, so that the young people not only have an understanding of themselves, they also have an understanding about the world in which they're moving through. I personally feel that the more education, the better, that kind of begins to fortify young people to be a lot stronger and not have to be sort of psychologically in spaces that I've seen young people go to because they don't really understand and they personalize. We tell our young people, try not to personalize. Unfortunately, this is a society that we live in. Just keep your head up and stay strong. So a lot of work around identity, understanding society, as well as engaging. How do you effectively engage with one another? So those are the pieces that I add.